It is 5 after, so we will go ahead and get started. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are today. Anyway, my name is Niki Acosta. I'm here with Bryce, and today's presentation is all about managing expectations with service contracts and welcome letters. And so, Bryce, I'll give you a chance here to introduce yourself, and then we'll do some housekeeping items.
Sure. My name is Bryce Sirrine. I'm the owner of Beyond Pool Cleaning, and I'm a Skimmer ambassador, mostly because I've been using the program for so long. Since it was a shell of what it is today when I first got started in the industry in 2017. Currently, we're servicing 520 customers in Scottsdale, Arizona. So
a large company. If you've been to a trade show and you've stopped by our booth, you've probably seen Bryce around and delivering talks locally in the Arizona area. So let's go over our agenda today and a few housekeeping items. First is, we are not lawyers. The content that we're talking about today was reviewed by an attorney, but you are responsible for the contents of your service contract. So please, if you decide to use this, definitely consult with an attorney for a review. We are recording today's presentation, and we will send out the full recording afterwards, along with some of the resources that we're going to cover today. So if you have to leave early, we'll make sure that you get a copy of this, or if you want to share it with somebody. Today, we're going to talk about setting expectations. We're going to cover service agreements, what goes in a service agreement, why you should put those things in a service agreement. We'll cover welcome packets and welcome letters, it's kind of an alternate version of a service agreement. We'll go through some helpful tips and best practices, and at the end, we will cover your Q&A. So if you have questions, feel free to pop those into the Q&A box on Zoom. There at the bottom of your screen, you see a little hover that says Q&A. And so with that, we'll go ahead and get started. I'll turn it over to you, Bryce.
Yeah, so when we first talked about it, one of the things I learned early on was about setting expectations, and how important that can be. We've all seen this pool owner, right? The person who refuses to get the preventative maintenance, like their filter cleans. They call on the weekend for non-emergencies. They don't pay on time. They demand you come back out for multiple visits when it's something that's beyond your control, or a storm, something like that. Or they're just generally, annoying and disruptive. So we've all had that type of customer, and one of the ways that you can kind of help prevent that from happening is, if you go back to the beginning and just set clear expectations and ensure what I always call is like the mutual fit, making sure that that customer is going to fit for what you need for your company, at the same time as that they're going to be happy with what you're preparing to offer. And the key way to do that is by having a service agreement, which definitely flows both ways. It's going to be, just discussing a lot of different things. A service agreement is a legal contract between a customer and a service provider, and it outlines important details about the relationship and like what duties are owed to one another. The service agreements can also apply to either like a one-time thing during like a limited time frame, or ongoing over a period of a long time. So this is something that you could use, for your day-to-day or an extended type thing. The things you typically want to make sure you include are what the services that you're going to provide are, your rate and the pricing, the term, and termination, meaning like, how does this service agreement sever? If it's, part of the term, like it's only a 1-year type deal, or if there's any dissatisfaction. And sometimes you might include things like, your different types of liability, the expectations that you have from them, and the things that you're not willing to work on. Insurance, especially if you're doing commercial, they're going to want to see that you're properly insured. Any kind of change in work, if there's different permissions or procedures, and of course, the assignment, if it's like a subcontract, you're going to have somebody else taking care of the work. Other legal considerations, if you really dive into it, you might talk about liability, so you can kind of limit that liability for the different people, but the terms need to be reasonable in order to stand up in court. You can't say something just blanketly like we're not liable for anything that we do. That doesn't really work in the court. So You also talk about obligations. The clients have to agree with you by sharing the required information. Providing access is usually like the big one, but ensuring that you're able to do the job that they've paid you to do. It's also good to consider having something on there regarding rate changes, so that both parties have to agree whether or not you can change the rate and how much notice you provide. I think that's important to keep into that, just because you want to set the boundary that yes, there will be rate changes over time. And then again, the termination. Either party should be able to end the contract with written notice. The agreement should end automatically if either party violates the terms. We will have a template if you want to talk a little bit about that, Niki.
Yeah, sure. So this is the service agreement template. And before we get too far, I will make a note here. Initially when we're working on this, we were calling it, full care contract or full service contract, but service agreement is probably the more appropriate term. There is sort of a minor difference between a service agreement and a contract. A contract is typically more formal. You'll see more formal legal language used. Contracts are usually always enforceable in court, while service agreements may not be enforceable in court. So minor distinction there, but you can basically think of a service agreement as a less formal contract. And it sounds friendlier too. I will say this morning, I was working on looking up a customer, and I looked at their website and it did say no contracts. They advertise no contracts. And so you might be able to overcome that objection with someone by saying, we don't have a contract, but we have a service agreement. And of course, the terms will help out there as well. So this is a copy, just a kind of a preview. We're going to go through the different sections in here, so there's no need to take screenshots. You're going to receive this at the end of the presentation. We'll go ahead and email this out to you. And what you'll see here are a few things. We did give you a place to put a logo if you want to put a logo, as well as your contact information there on the bottom. We also left page numbers here at the bottom right. That way, if you ever need to discuss or reference something in your full service agreement with a client, it's easier to find that section. You can say, go to page 2 and look at bullet point number 5 or something like that. And then in this full service agreement, you'll see a bunch of areas that are marked in brackets. And so those are all of the things that you will need to customize for sure for your business. So those are definitely the things that you'll want to review if you choose to use this as is. Bryce, you want to cover compensation?
Yeah, for sure. So like they said, it's pretty self-evident, but this is how you're going to ensure that you're getting paid and what your services are including. So this is also where I like to include notice about rate changes. Like it says on the side, I said earlier, you want to make sure your customer understands that you will have rate changes as things happen. You like to establish that early on. But you also say, you outline what your service is going to be, how many times per week you're going to be out there, and you let them know that their rate at whatever terms you have. So if you have a rate dollar that's once per month, or if it's per stop, and then of course whether or not you're including your chemicals, and you can kind of specify which chemicals you include with your service as well. For your services, I actually really like to use my Skimmer checklist in this and just run right through all the different things that my technicians are going to be doing while they're out there, when they're doing their swipes. So it's talking about cleaning all the different baskets, brushing steps and benches. This is one of those times where I like to get really involved in what the process is. It's really easy for you to say something like, we clean the pool every week, but that doesn't sound as detailed as actually listing all the things that go into cleaning the pool, which will both hold you guys accountable for the work that you're doing, but also it makes it look like you're actually showing everything that you do on site. So it makes the service look more valuable. And then also I like to add a clause, with Skimmer especially, you can add custom checklist items. So I add that little clause that you guys can mutually agree on an inclusion of other things to the checklist, which would also be negotiated into the rate. That might not be something huge, but it might be, I know that some people do things like hose down the decking or something at their commercial sites, and that's not at all a normal service for most pool companies, and they would definitely want to charge for that. or it could be something as simple as, ensuring that the gate's latched and having a photo of that. So it can be, both pretty complex or, pretty standard. Also, talking about the just access and your filter cleanings. I always make it very clear that it's the customer's responsibility to make sure that you can access the pool. Out here in Arizona, we don't. We do have some pool covers, but typically most pool companies don't want to touch or interact with the pool covers. So it's important that the pool is uncovered. I know that that's sort of different depending on your area, but just another note of different things you might want to include. When you talk about your access, you have to be able to reach the pool. And the same thing with like the filter cleanings. I include that in my service agreements because I want to ensure that my customers are going to allow us to do those filter cleanings. We've all been there before where the customer is not keeping up with their maintenance and the pool suffers, and they want to blame you even though they're not doing the work that you've asked them to do. So it just kind of makes it a little bit more clear that we are going to do that work right up front. We also talk about like skip weeks or poor weather. I always use the analogy that we don't carry our lightning rods into the backyard when we start to see lightning out. So we might have different types of service that we offer during those types of periods. Like we always call it just chems and baskets when we're having storms. But I know that in different parts of the country, there's different types of storms that might require you to just not be able to service that area at all. So it might be good to address that. Like you can see here in that part B, it's talking about not to exceed the 5 postponements per year, but you might do it for illness, holiday, things of that nature. We use the skip weeks, for basically like our holidays. The skip weeks being, for a year-round service like ourselves, we basically only charge for 48 weeks of service, and so we only provide 48 weeks of service. So there's 4 weeks every year that we take off. So we kind of talk about that right up front, so we can take off those 4 weeks for different reasons. Their billing and pre-approved maintenance can also be like, incredibly important for you. You don't need to get set up in such a way that you're hung up on little $10 repairs that take forever for you to be able to get approved. So we always like to suggest a certain dollar amount be considered for automatic approval. Here in Phoenix, I use $75 now, or if it's under $75, we just take care of it. Repairs greater than that, we get approval for. And then also just the terms of your payment, you might require a card on file. This might be good even just to have the payment terms, when you expect to get payment, what happens if payments are late, things of that nature would be great to go in here as well.
And on that repairs piece, that's a really important piece because, in talking to Steve Homer, who's the president of UPA, he said one of the things that he sees quite a bit is people get hurt when a lid is damaged or sun damaged and someone steps on it and it cracks. Even something as innocuous as a lid, like if it's broken, you should have permission to just go ahead and change it. And so as you're talking to customers about why you have repairs less than X amount, it would be for those minor things. If it's like a seal or a lid or a weird door or something that would prevent their pool from working properly. So make sure when you're going through this with a customer that you're educating them along the way on those types of things. And for the payment, by default, if you're signing up for any kind of modern service now, I mean, there is no other way to pay these days other than a credit card. And so by establishing this upfront, you prevent people from thinking that you do accept checks or you do accept cash or you do accept some other form of payment. By collecting their credit card upfront and enrolling them in auto pay upfront, you are definitely going to help your cash flow. You're going to get paid faster, and you're not going to have to spend as much time in chasing payments. And so obviously Skimmer billing can help with that, but this is a best practice and we're seeing more pros move to it. So save yourself some time, and by default, allow yourselves to keep that credit card on file and collect auto payments.
Yeah, great point. We always talk about cash flow being one of the hardest things to maintain in the business. So having that opportunity to be able to collect the card up front can really help out your business. Other things you might include, just special clauses for special customers like short-term rentals, commercial sites, things of that nature, of course, as well. But you might be letting them know that you conduct multiple services every week. You guys have seen like a little article that we wrote about these. We definitely recommend that for like these short-term rentals. We kind of call the one visit your recovery visit early in the week, and then a prep visit late in the week for the next check-in dates. And then, of course, no skip weeks. So if you do the skip week thing, like I mentioned before, you might extend it for short-term rentals. They don't receive that. And obviously, that means an adjustment of their rate as well. So definitely keep that in mind, that you might have different terminology for different types of properties rather than having like a different agreement for them. And then addressing the different communication. Something that's been more and more common is making sure you have permission to contact via the text messaging, whatever it is, the government starting to crack down on those and kind of force you to have actual permission to contact people with the text messaging. Make sure you use the communication sentence to kind of convey things like your business hours, what to do in the event of an emergency. And then, you might also talk about doing things like the on-the-way text, which I guess for Skimmer, it's coming out pretty shortly, where it'll automatically send those messages for you, which would be great.
That is correct. We do have text messaging on our roadmap for Q3, I'm allowed to say. So be prepared for that. We'll have some abilities to send that directly through Skimmer for those who are interested. And so by including this, hey, if you give us your phone number, you are opting in or authorizing us to text you. We're kind of doing this to help you collect that permission up front.
Yeah, definitely. And we definitely use this for something like people who have aggressive dogs that you want to text on the way to make sure the dogs are secured. You might also include something like requiring them to respond back to you that the situation is safe. Sometimes a one-way text message isn't really the best way to ensure you're safe. So consider adding some language about that as well. And then easy come, easy go, the termination clause. I don't know about everybody, but I hate going to pools where I know they're not happy with our service. I would never want to have a situation where someone was forced to stay on service for a certain duration of time. So I always like to have a message like this that kind of talks about why it would be terminated, either way. So you make sure to keep that problem customer able to leave and annoy somebody else at any time. But in the same case, if you're unhappy with them, you want to make sure that you're able to terminate the contract as well. But some of the language you could say, if the customer fails to pay within a certain time period, doesn't abide by the clauses in the contract, different things like that can make this contract be considered terminated. Then, of course, a customer information sheet. You can see this pretty much follows line by line all the information you're going to need to log it back into your Skimmer and QuickBooks, or your Skimmer billing, however you're setting up the business. Makes it really quick and easy for you to apply it all and collect all that information all at once. Especially like Niki was just talking about, the actual billing information. Of course, make sure you use care when you're collecting and storing credit card information. So
yeah, this is a really good prompt too, while you're on site, to be able to collect some additional information that you might want to put into Skimmer. So if someone has a salt cell or a heater or something of that nature, we left you a little line here to collect helpful notes or additional services. So that all that stuff is in writing. So it's a good way just to make sure that you're checking all the boxes, collecting all the information, and not having to chase it down later. I know that there are some pool and spa pros using Skimmer that have checklists that they've created for onboarding a pool, which would include collecting this information and taking photos and storing them in Skimmer at the first visit, so that you have all of the pump information and you can reference that at a later date.
Yeah,
You know, one more thing, actually, go back to that last slide, Bryce. Well, I wanted to make a note here. We left a place for for a customer to write their billing information. It is best practice, always, 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 to make sure that if you're collecting this stuff on paper, once it's entered, you either destroy the paper, and at all times when it's in transit, i.e. if you are emailing it, you want to make sure that you're using an email account that has two-factor auth that's locked down. It is not a great scenario if your email account gets hacked and somebody gets access to all of your customers' billing information. And so collecting in person is probably a good bet. Collecting over the phone is probably second. But emailing, or definitely do not use a social media platform to send billing information. If you're collecting that, it's your responsibility to make sure that that information is protected throughout the entire process.
Great point.
All right, welcome packets. So what is a welcome packet? You can think of a welcome packet or a welcome letter as your fun, friendly version of the service agreement. So it basically does everything that the one that we just showed you did, but it's a little bit less formal. So it gives you an alternate way to get agreement and lay out customer responsibilities. It's also a really, really good tool for educating your customers and assuming the sale. This is a really good way to sell your value, to make sure that there's mutual fit. And so the language that's used here is going to come from Bryce's example of what he actually uses for his customers. But if you don't want to get involved in doing paper contracts, or having to get into a situation where you're having to track all that stuff and file that stuff, this is an alternate way to be able to get agreement and lay out your services and customer responsibility so that you have something to reference later.
Yeah, so just to kind of dive into what more or less my letter looks like, and someone had asked us earlier about looking for the best practice for kind of getting this started from scratch for their business where they don't have anything in place. To be honest, like I rolled this out not all that long ago myself, starting with new customers and then eventually sending it to all my older customers as well. But what I utilize is the welcome letter because it's a little bit less aggressive in my mind. It's more friendly, and it was really easy for me to send to my existing customers to start to put them onto that same kind of perspective of what we offer and what we expect. It's written in plain English. It's going to still talk about our pricing model, the services, the expectations, and I always really like to focus on that language where we're ensuring we're the right fit for you. I think this is included in our handout too, so I don't need to go through and essentially read it all out to everybody. But the main thing that I would just say is when you're sending it out to your previous customers is just to have that messaging to them to say, hey, our business is continuing to grow and succeed, and we just wanted to take this step to make everything a little bit more legitimate and put out there, this is what our service is and what it includes. I think it's important to keep it really short and sweet. I think mine's 2 pages. It's only a little bit longer than this. So it's just about making it short and sweet and letting them be able to read through it really, really quickly to see what it is that you're offering. And then, of course, it's really important to have kind of your commitment at the end, your time to shine, right? It's to signal them that you're professional, you know what you're doing. You want to kind of reinforce the value of professional service. And then also you're proactively educating your customers. I think, Niki and I were talking about it just earlier, but when you take the time to actually educate your customers, it makes you more trustworthy as well. They're also going to understand that you're somebody that understands what the business is. And I also like to outline, one of our biggest complaints that we'll get sometimes is that our service was too fast. So I'd like to outline to them why our service is so fast and what it really means for their service, for the service of their pool for the full week, not so much about the one day. Again, I know that's a little bit different out here in Arizona versus a lot of places like, our cactus don't have nearly as many leaves as all of your trees do. So it makes it a little bit easier for us to maintain these shorter service stops. But it's kind of a good thing to address. It's like letting our customers know you're not paying for a duration of a stop. What you're paying for is a clean, functioning pool, and that's what the service that we're providing. Some other different items you can definitely consider, your responsibility section, things that you want your customer to be doing for you, things like maintaining the water level. You might also, again, we talked a little bit about accessibility, keeping their dogs locked up, all those types of things that you want to make sure that they understand they are responsible for. Some different pool safety tips or printouts are always good. Different information about chemical storage. Custom language too for things that are a little bit different, like if you guys have vinyl liners, something we don't have out here. If they have retractable pool covers, if you're doing different things for their pool openings and closing, and then you need applicable warranty information when you're installing equipment that might have a warranty or that your warranties that you yourself are providing. And of course, just your contact information, which I think Niki had a great comment she wanted to make.
Yeah, so I learned this in the home building business, but if you are working with a client and you want to make it easy for them to refer you and to contact you, you can make a sticker that goes on the inside of a cabinet door. The benefit here is and I whipped this up in a little program called Canva. In like 5 minutes, I just used a pre-made template. But basically, you can take the sticker, put it inside the door. It looks good. So if you want to include a QR code, you can put a QR code on there, but it gives you an easy way to get referrals from your existing customers. And if the house gets sold, typically magnets will come off the fridge, but these stickers tend to stay on the inside of the cabinet. So it gives you the opportunity to continue servicing a pool that you've been servicing in the event a home is sold. So if you don't want to do, stickers, you can also include things like business cards or, referral cards or something of that nature to put in your welcome packets. So be creative, definitely invest in your branding, make your brand recognizable and make things that your customers will want to share with their friends and family members.
Yeah, definitely. Talking about some of the different delivery options that we have, you could definitely do in person. I recently was meeting with someone who works with a lot of really high-end customers, and he has his whole welcome packet. He goes to each customer and he goes through everything line by line, which definitely gives you an opportunity to answer questions, overcome objections. You can definitely go from your quote process to closing really quickly. And the customer is going to really understand, and you're going to know that they reviewed and understand every section of it. And of course, the cons, it's a paper process. There's no digital history. And something, we didn't write here, of course, is it's going to take a lot more time for you. Then of course, digital delivery. I see a lot of people talking, in the Q&A asking questions about like DocuSign. That's definitely an option that's going to require them to initial and sign each section. You can also, if it's something that's really informal, like the welcome letters, we ask them to agree just by replying to this email, letting us know that they've read it and they agree. Definitely the pros, it's efficient and it's still professional. It doesn't require an in-person meeting, but of course, it's easier to skip to the sections. And if you're using like a digital signature software, it costs money, requires a little bit of knowledge for some of your customers who might not have the same experience. Although I'd say that most people understand how those work at this point. They've received plenty of them. And then of course, just less of a personal touch in comparison to the in-person one. I'd say that the in-person, you're probably going to have a much higher close rate, but the time associated with that isn't going to be a good fit for every business model, obviously. And then just some helpful tips and best practices. Little word on liability. Make sure that you do have adequate insurance coverage. When we talk to like the UPA people or the IPSA people, they talk about some of the most common high dollar insurance claims, which is like pool chemistry. Usually, it results in like a new pool build, but damaging the finished equipment, like you're burning out heaters. overflowing water. If you turn on a hose or something like that, you could potentially drain. You could potentially, overflow and flood a house. Drain covers, making sure that the drain covers are the correct anti-vortex covers. Different safety issues like the broken skimmer lids that you can step on and fall through. Full covers, making sure that you're either not handling them, or if your insurance covers something like that, that your team isn't all trained very well on how to do it. Same with like chemical hazards, spills, improperly stored chemicals, and then improper ventilation, carbon monoxide poisoning, making sure that your heaters are what they're supposed to be. You're following all those rules. Also, ensure you're protecting your customer information, especially those credit card numbers, like Niki kind of outlined. And then, of course, consider actually speaking with your attorney, getting some approved custom language for your pool openings, or work when you're referring builders to set up. So just have really clear written policies. And then, of course, it's always the best practice to document everything. So, as Skimmer users ourselves, for most people here today, making sure you're taking those photos that are date stamped and locked into the service, and emailed to the customer. So it makes a really strong chain of evidence for, if a situation arises, it's pretty easy for you to show that you weren't the cause of that.
And on that, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say,
yes.
I do have an example of that. When we go out and do our first service quotes, we took a lot of photos of a customer's pool. And then after taking care of it for a year, we were kind of becoming unhappy with each other, and it was time to terminate service. And we wanted to say that we caused a lot of staining. Unfortunately, we had proof that the pool had always been stained that way. So it was really easy for us just to show him that we were covered. We had the documentation that his ploy to try to get a free pool out of us wasn't going to work. So, it helps protect us.
And on that insurance coverage too, in talking to several pool pros just about insurance coverage in general, a lot of people buy it because they need to check a box. But what I found in talking to some industry pros who've been through, I'll say, insurance claim issues, they may not cover everything. There have definitely been instances where somebody has, gotten sued, they file an insurance claim, and the legal fees ate through the coverage that should have gone to settle the insurance claim. So definitely make sure that you understand your insurance coverage policy, and maybe even, go through some of these scenarios with your insurance provider, and make sure you understand what is covered and what is not.
Yes. And then, of course, always be closing, welcome packets and letters. They're a sales tool and an opportunity for you to sell your value. So make sure that they're not real harsh, talking about everything that can go wrong. And also talk about, that these are the things we're discussing so that everything goes right. Invest in branding, ask for reviews, and remember that every digital and in-person interaction is an opportunity to ask for referrals. Make sure you're creative and make it easy for others to refer you. So different things like them having the information available for them, having the QR code or a safe place inside the cabinet where they know your information is so they can share it. It just makes it much easier for you to get those referrals. And of course, if it's time to part ways, if you guys decide you're not going to be a good fit, even at the beginning or at the end, it's always nice for you to have a message to them, letting them know that if your service agreement doesn't fit up with their needs, or if they're not happy with it, that you don't negotiate it. That's what you need to run your business. And then it's always a nice touch just to offer other pool professionals who might be a better fit for them, and to have some new referral partners there. And make sure that the people you're referring are people who will actually work out for them, and you're not just sending them off, on a wild goose chase. And then, do also give them an opportunity to return to you, and unless, of course, you don't want that, if they weren't a fit for other reasons. And just a few more of the best practices. Remember that the service agreements are legal documents, but they should still be in plain English and understandable to your reader. And for existing customers, For regular service, make it easy to part ways. So again, you're not stuck in those situations where you're happy to go to a home where they don't want you there. And then give new customers a chance to back out if they're not going to agree to the routine maintenance, of standards of care or whatever. That's fine. You don't have to take them on as a customer. Definitely, you want to focus on the quality of your customer over the quantity. You want to make sure you have good customers. You should make your welcome packets fun, friendly, and just reinforce the components of your service agreement. You can also use the broadcast emails to regularly remind your customers of components of their service agreements, in the kind of a friendly, informative, and proactive way. Definitely something that we lean on for those things that are more seasonal in regards to like the storms, things of that nature, so that we can just remind them this is what our policy is, and we're gonna still take good care of you, but just reminder that our employees are our number one concern. And of course, make sure you're always asking for those referrals every chance that you get. The bottom line, you just want to make sure that your service agreements are going to clearly communicate the expectations from the get-go with the customers, letting them know that you're professional and that you're just going to make sure that you're on the same page. For your existing customers, you can let them know that you're professionalizing, that you're stepping up your experience a little bit, and that you're just wanting to put it all into pen and paper so they can see it. Lawsuits are expensive, so ideally our goal is not to end up in lawsuits, and making sure that you kind of enforce those claims. A lot of times enforcing the clauses for like regular service and petty terms, for petty claims will probably cost you more money than you'll get. So it's better just letting a customer go and getting a new one in most cases. But having this thing clearly outlined makes it easier for you to have that turnover. You don't deal with somebody who's not going to be a good fit for you for a long time. And of course, the service agreements and welcome packets are tools to set expectations and really evaluate that fit and make sure that you mutually agree to partner on the care of the pool or spa. Making sure you guys are on the same page for what services you're going to provide and what they're expected to do. It goes a long ways in your own success and happiness as well.
Yeah, and real quick, if you want to go back a slide, another thing that we didn't include in here, there are what's called arbitration clauses, which basically say, if you decide to bring suit against us, we are going to go to some kind of mediator first, usually splitting the cost. Some people do binding arbitration. We did include that here because it varies by state. Different states have different rules, but if you wanted to do an arbitration clause to say that you would go to a mediator before you went to court, or you have to do a mediation and you refuse to go to court, you can definitely include those. But if you're going to include those, definitely consult with a local attorney. There are also clauses that you can put in here so that if you are involved in a lawsuit, that you specify where a lawsuit can happen. So if you've got, a property manager who lives, in a different state, and they want to bring a lawsuit against you, you don't want to have to travel to a different state to deal with that lawsuit. You're going to want to make sure that it's in your own jurisdiction. So definitely check out arbitration clauses, see if they're right for you. Consult with an attorney if you want to agree to having one in your service agreement. And last but not least, we've covered skimmer billing in previous webinars. We wanted to remind you, though, that we also have an in-house credit card dispute team when you use skimmer billing. So if you have not tried skimmer billing and you would love to get your customers paying faster and spending less time on processing invoices and payments, give skimmer billing a try. We've got that in-house credit card dispute team that will handle all of the credit card disputes on your behalf. So we'll work with the vendors, we'll work with the appropriate parties to get resolved on those issues, which can save you a ton of time. And obviously having a service agreement that outlines your service and what you can bill for definitely helps in this regard. But we just wanted to make note of that there for you.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome for making sure you don't have to just lose those disputes.
So Q&A time. It's our favorite part. Let's see. Do service agreements need to be signed by the customer, or can you accept that their payments show acknowledgement of the agreement? Typically, if you are doing a formalized service agreement, you'll want to collect a signature. If you want any chance of having it being enforceable in court in case something happens, you're going to need a signature. However, we do understand and recognize that there are tons of pull pros out there due to the nature and the cost of their service, don't want to have to collect a signature. And so that's when having a, please, if you agree to these terms, please reply to us in email. That's where those kinds of clauses come in handy, because at least at that point, you do have documentation of some kind from a verifiable email address. So the important thing is, obviously lay out your terms, have an agreement, and then get agreement in a way that's trackable, whether that be, via email. Best practice is say get a signature, digital or in person.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think maybe if you had your service agreement on every invoice, you could maybe push that, but I don't think that you really want to do that either. So probably the best practice would be to send that and require a response in some way for your service agreement directly.
I see a question here. What is a good amount to set for automatic approval? That is going to vary based on your market conditions in your area. Bryce, I think, shared that his will fix it and go ahead and bill you without having to convey it. His limit is $75, but that may not be good in your area. It just depends on what you want to cover and your customer's willingness to be able to auto approve those types of things. But typically, the smaller repair items, skimmer baskets, lids, the kind of things that, you want to make sure in good working condition, you absolutely want to make it as easy as possible to repair those things in a timely way.
Yeah, definitely nothing to add there.
Are the transaction fees coded in US dollars? I think that might be a question in regards to skimmer billing. I do believe that they are, Janine. I think, as of my understanding, skimmer billing is available primarily for US customers because it's in US dollars. We have it looks like we have a few more skimmer billing questions. We're thinking of moving over to skimmer billing. Who can I call with questions I have about skimmer billing? Is Flavia? Looks like they found it. I think we have Flavia on the line with us as a panelist here, if she wants to chime in. When you said chemical storage, what are you referring to? At the customer's location or something else? So we do recognize that you may have customers that choose to buy and store their own chemicals. What you don't want to do is sell them chemicals that end up causing a hazard and being liable for it. And so that might be something that you can spell out, as you can say something to the effect of, if you are choose to store your own chemicals, here are some helpful tips to make sure you can prevent a chemical hazard. If one occurs, we are not responsible. So that's just checking a box and making sure that your customer's aware. There are, and I'll be the first one to admit it, there are a lot of people who just don't know that you shouldn't store certain chemicals next to other chemicals. And we've certainly seen, all of us have probably seen and read things when it comes to chemical storage.
Yeah, definitely. I think that when we wrote that initially, we were talking about the customer storing chemicals at their site. But in general, we prefer that they don't do that. But some of our customers like to provide their own chemicals. So we'll kind of have those little amendments in there.
Robert made a comment, arbitration clauses should be in the agreements for sure. I agree with you, Robert. It's pretty uncommon, at least in Texas where I live, to see an agreement without one. Most people don't want to go to court. They don't want to spend a ton of money on legal fees and filing fees, etc. And arbitration gives you a way to resolve something at a much lower cost possibly than going to court. As far as referrals, we try not to refer people because that can be a liability if that falls back on us. Well, you referred us to XYZ and they didn't do XYZ and now it's your fault. What are your thoughts on that? You want to take that one, Bryce?
Well, so you should definitely be vetting the people that you refer, making sure that they're, licensed, that they're, they have the correct insurance, things of that nature when you refer them, and that, they're going to represent you well. But from like a liability standpoint, you're not really liable for referring somebody as long as you didn't knowingly send them to somebody that is doing things illegally or something like that. So, but at the same token, I definitely have run into that in the past where you refer somebody, they drop the ball, and now it makes you look bad. So you try and make up for it, but yeah, that could definitely be a tough situation to be in. So, the answer is you're not liable, but you'll probably feel like you want to take care of them anyway.
Yeah, and it also depends on the relationship that you have with a vendor that you want to bring in. In my experience, there's kind of two ways to go about it. You can either charge the customer and maybe include an upcharge and then pay your subcontractor, or you can have them work with the subcontractor directly. And so depending on the nature of the repair or the subcontract work, you've kind of got those two options sitting out there. You can either refer them, or if it's somebody that you really trust, maybe consider doing it under your umbrella and paying that person yourself. Jeremy Groover has a question. Bryce, I got a question for you. We seem to share about the same size of company. How are you handling service calls and diagnostic call charges? I currently charge a diagnostic call charge, but every so often I get the question, does the diagnostic charge go towards the repair? If we make the repair through your company, how do you handle that?
So Jeremy, I actually do that. If we go out and do a diagnostic charge for somebody, first thing we do, we bill them in advance before we put them on the schedule, just because it's what we call like one of our filters. We get tons of calls of people like that want us to come out, and I don't want to chase the money later for someone for like a one-time thing. And then we do offer the discount if they do the repair through us. Typically we just, to be blunt about it, we build it into the charge. So we offer the discount and the incentive for them to go with us. And if they choose not to go with our service, then we still make the money to make it worth our time going out to that home for the one-time visit.
Do you recommend a service agreement is made each year? So it depends on the nature of your term. So, if you have a termination clause in your agreement that allows either of you to leave whenever you want, it's probably not necessary to do that. This is also a reason why we included the language around rate increases, is because we wanted to give you all a way to set expectations with your customers that rate increases happen and that you'll give them notice when they do happen. But we also wanted to just give you a way to keep your service agreement terms in place. You can include language inside of your service agreement regarding those types of issues. So if you want to make it clear, depending on your situation, definitely consult with an attorney. Is Skimmer billing better than QuickBooks? Looks like we've got other people answering that question. Thank you all for answering that. Yes, and it's getting better. We are continually adding new features based on the requests we're hearing back from you all, but it should save you a ton of time and money, and you won't have to juggle going back and forth between platforms. Everything is already there. If you charge separately for chemicals, it makes it super, super easy. We've added some additional features and functionality to do discounting and to add additional fees if you want to do that. So definitely check out Skimmer Billing if you haven't already. If you would like to contact someone in Skimmer Billing, you can call support, or you can, I'll share a phone number here if you want to grab a pen. Erica and Anessa are billing specialists, and you can call them at 520-552-2888. 2423. SMS seems like a nice touch. What are some other projects on the Skimmer roadmap? We are talking about doing a Skimmer product roadmap webinar. We're discussing that idea. And so Alec, definitely reach out to support for that question in particular, but know that we're also working on being able to convey what's on our roadmap. I know that LSI calculations have been a big request, and that's something that's pretty high on the roadmap. And there's some other really cool things coming. Auto syncs in the mobile app so that you don't have to perform manual syncs, things like that. So hopefully we'll have more news for you on that soon.
Yeah, lots of cool stuff. We just don't always know what we're allowed to share and have a timeline for it yet. So,
Bryce, what is your typical diagnostic charge? Half hour of labor? Question mark.
So every situation is a little bit different, and where I'm at in Arizona, it might be way different from other places. In general, we're going to charge like $50, and it's like I said, it's more about a filter to make sure that they're serious about actually getting work done before we schedule the time to go out there. So it's not always about the money as much as about making sure we're not wasting our time.
Someone asked a question about an estimate or proposal / contract / building feature built into Skimmer. We use a construction platform that has that feature. Is this on the agenda for Skimmer? Stay tuned. We have heard that product request, most definitely. And anytime that you do have a product request, please email us, email support@getskimmer.com and give us your request. We log all of those and we make decisions based on frequency. So if you've got a product request, definitely let us know. We also tag your account when you send in a product request so that we can notify you or reach out to you if we have questions about how to build a particular feature. So we always welcome your product feedback. Thanks for that question, Robert. So many questions coming in. A lot of questions about Skimmer billing. Is Skimmer billing a full accounting system like QuickBooks? Not fully. So there are some things in Skimmer billing like expensing, payroll management that we do not do. However, we do have a plethora of reports that should fit most of your accounting requests or needs. So if you have questions about that, Olivia, definitely reach out to support and to our billing team to walk you through that.
Just to jump ahead, I see Mike saying they're having some trouble with weather out in Atlanta, making this recording a little choppy. But just so you know, we will send you the recording. We'll send it to your email after we're all done here.
A lot of questions about where you find the template. So after this webinar concludes in 2 minutes, we're going to process this video and get it uploaded to YouTube. And we will send you the link, Bryce's template that he uses to email to people, and then the more formal service agreement template. So we'll send those to you immediately once this is done. Is Skimmer billing a replacement to QuickBooks and not supplementary to the integration of a QuickBooks application? It can be, absolutely. We still are supporting QuickBooks Online integrations. QuickBooks for Desktop was end of life, so they stopped supporting it. I think at the end of, I think it was last month. So if you are looking for a replacement to QuickBooks, definitely book some time with Anessa and Erica and have them give you a one-on-one walkthrough of Skimmer billing. And you're welcome, Janine Camp. She said, thank you for the very informative webinar. All right, so we will go ahead and officially end the webinar here. Bryce and I will stick around if you have additional questions for a few more minutes.